I'm here today with John Storyk, the architect and acoustician, co-founding partner of Walters-Storyk Design Group. And you're celebrating at least 50 years in the business, right?
I think it's now tilting up to 52. That's an old press release.
So what I want to know is, after 50 years doing this, how do you stay creative with your work?
Wow. And you said this was going to be easy and you were going to start with easy questions and we would ramp up, maybe some hobbies, but you got to start with the,
We could go back to that if you want.
no, we might as well just get that over with. I'm not quite sure of the perfect answer, but I think maybe pieces of that answer in no particular order. I've been teaching always for 30 years, 35 years, this particular craft, recording studio design and small room acoustics, which after 10,000 attempts, I've gotten reasonably good at it. Okay. And so I think the teaching part, okay, is, excuse me for 1 second. I'm just going to say goodbye to my wife.
Bye, Beth.
Well, she's in the other room there. Well, she can't hear you. Anyway, that's the W, by the way, in WSDG.
Right.
Okay, thank you. And so I think, very early on, my mom and dad, particularly my dad, instilled learning as a core value. I went to a school, that very much believed in learning and teaching being the same thing. So it's always been a part of me. And so I think being a teacher and always loving teaching has kept me youngish and passionate about wanting to do that, because by definition, as I get older, I'm always hanging out with younger people.
Right.
Okay. And a lot of the students, and we're going to talk about this a little bit probably, students became interns, became partners, and now they're my teachers. And they're all younger than me. I'm the oldest person in my company, which is now our company, as you'll learn, or as you know. And it's got about 65 people. And I'm as old as a lot of the parents of my partners. And in fact, older than some of the parents of my partners. So, stay young, forever young, the Dylan song. Those words. I mean, I only wish I could have written those words. Right. A great wife. It took a few tries to get it. Might as well get that out. And that's the Beth that you just waved at, and she's in the other room. Now, Beth is smarter than me. She didn't retire, but her longtime life passion of painting is now occupying most of her time. She steps in on some larger decisions and whatever, but she's now painting 4 to 6 hours a day in her own studio. Happens to be in the office today doing some paperwork. But,
well, can we go? Because I actually had a question about that. You guys have worked together forever.
Well,
for a long time. And how do you do that? Because you guys vacation together, you work together, you're always together.
Well, it took a long time for us to find each other. A few false starts. Would have been more economic if I didn't marry all the girlfriends. But finally, it's approaching 35 years now. We met at a common Thanksgiving. She arrived with a 6-month-old baby and a relationship that was over, as you can imagine. And I arrived with her girlfriend, who was my date at the time, and basically left with her. Actually, I'm not even quite sure if it was basically. And within 6 months, I fell in love immediately with her, and her a few days longer. Within 6 months, we were partners in everything. Beth is by trade a textile designer, and also a sort of a quasi interior designer, New York City street kid, and she just took a liking to what I was doing. And if you look at a 52-year body of work, you can kind of see when she arrived, because before that there was a lot of browns and woods and black. And I'm not not a major color guy. And then all of a sudden, studios and projects have a lot more color, and that's when Beth arrived, and we became partners. We formed Walters-Storyk Design Group because we weren't married. A lot of people think that's my name. That's her last name. And we were partners for a few years before we got married. Then we got married. We had another kid. We raised both of the kids, and we had a life together that took us to our country home, and then the country home became our full-time home, and that's where we've been ever since. We have common interests. One of them is traveling, cooking. She's much better than me, but I certainly like the eating part and the assisting part. We love design.
Mm-hmm.
He's passionate about design, and so it was a natural fit. And unlike most couples that don't work together, so I'm told, it just worked for us.
So how do you guys influence each other?
Well, Beth is more grounded than I am, like most women. She's intuitively smarter than I am. I'm a little scattered. I am constantly at 30,000 feet. I'm always with a lot of new ideas, much more down to earth and practical. So there was really a natural fit. Mm-hmm. Neither of us are business people. I think we got entrepreneurial genes inside of us, and that we've always worked for ourselves for a long time. I mean, I had one job for 4 months, ended up getting hired by Jimi Hendrix, and I never worked for anybody since. It's a well-known story, but we can talk about that. And she had some jobs out of school, but then kind of formed her own company. Actually, when I met her, she was basically doing display work. She had more power tools than I did. She would be one of those people that set up booths at the Javits for certain trades. And in fact, in our first year, I assisted her on one job. It was hysterical. So we just complement each other. She now, in retrospect, 35 years later, I can say that she allowed remember, she arrives in my life on a career that was already 15, 18 years old, mm-hmm. with some success, actually quite a bit of success. So she allowed that to continue. And, I'm grateful for that. I didn't always realize that, but now I do. And now it's time for her to do what she's always been passionate about. But me, even though I've handed over operational responsibilities to my new partners, my old partners who are now mm-hmm. My old employees who are now partners, I still am involved with all the design work. I'm still working 10 hours a day, sometimes 12, because I enjoy working. I just enjoy doing it. So that's an interesting moment in our lives right now, because now we don't see each other sometimes during the day. It's actually unusual that she's in the next room right now. She's usually in her painting studio. We're on a, to give you an idea where we are, we're sort of in a complex, like a rural setting, 2 mm-hmm. hours north of New York. It's got multiple buildings, our home, our office, studio, carpentry shop, storage, garage. It's on about 60 acres. It's pretty nice. And nice. That's where we live and work when we're here.
Right.
And half the year we're not here. Half the year we're in other homes.
Right. So before we go into that part, you talked about how you both pretty much just worked for yourself. A lot of people are afraid to work for themselves. And especially when things are tough during the pandemic, it's hard to,
I'm going to turn the phone off. Sorry, everybody. Real world.
It's hard to work for yourself, but
it's very hard.
What attributes do you think people need to have to be able to work for yourself and be successful? I mean, you said neither of you are business people, but you both are very successful.
We're not business people in that we're not trained in business. We don't really wake up every day thinking in terms of profit or managerial issues. Having said that, I've 60 plus people work in our universe that somehow got created serendipitously by the two of us. And we pay our bills. Everybody gets salaries. We give out bonuses. We've actually had a very good last few years, ironically enough. And I'm pretty convinced that most people don't really want to work for themselves. Now, that doesn't mean they don't want to work.
Right.
Actually, I think most people do want to work, despite what's going on right now at this given moment. And everybody just, whenever you see this, it's August 24th. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
It's fine. Yeah.
And yes, it seems that people are not going back to work, and you're reading one article after another. But I think that most people want most of the same things most of the time. I really believe that. Most people want to be good people. Most people want to be family oriented, do good work, do honest work, pay their bills, et cetera, et cetera. But that doesn't mean that they're even interested in being entrepreneurial. It's a lot of responsibility. So I'm not sure what defines an entrepreneur, but I think I have a handle on a few qualities. For starters, you have to have really, really broad shoulders. You have to not be afraid to fail.
Right.
And I don't know where I got that. I don't know where that comes from. I grew up in modest means. Beth actually grew up in even less than modest means, so we're somewhat self-made. Mom and Dad got me to college, but I had to pick up the rest of the tab, and then I started. And so you have to be afraid not to fail. Very early on, I was really lucky. Well, serendipity is the word I like to use in how this career unfolded almost magically and accidentally. And during this amazing summer of 1969, besides Woodstock, which I went to, by the way, and meeting lots of people, working for Jimmy, building Electric Lady, I also got to study with Buckminster Fuller for 6 weeks, right down the street from Electric Lady. I was working on the studio in the morning and going to 4 hours of this seminar every afternoon at the Art Students League, literally down the street on 8th Street in Manhattan. And one day, Bucky, he would ramble. That when he talked, he just rambled. It was completely free form. And he said something to the effect of, "You only learn by your mistakes." Those might not have been his exact words. What he was really meaning was, you have the highest moment of learning when you fail.
Right.
Doesn't mean you should fail. In fact, you should try not to fail. Okay. I think it's the same thing as Thomas Edison when they asked him if he was depressed that he couldn't get the light bulb filament to work. He says, "Yeah, I know, but I now know 2,000 elements that don't work."
Right.
I might be misquoting him,
but no, when I have failed, I try not to fail ever.
Of course.
But if you need to learn from that, right?
The learning curve is high.
Yeah. So that the failure actually promotes like a higher level when,
and I'm trying to always instill that with my team here. Okay. So we have a motto. We simply don't believe in the word problem. Problem to us equals opportunity. So, and if you think about it, we're in the problem solving business. I mean, we're in the business of delivering solutions to, in most instances, other people's dreams.
Right.
AKA clients.
Right.
Now, we do some other things that are our dreams. We invent some things. We develop some software. We have, we're doing other things that don't have clients. I mean, we're our own client.
Right.
But for the most part, that's what's going on here. That's how we send out invoices. That's the business.
Right.
The business is making dreams happen for other people. Okay. Essentially trying to bat 1,000 all the time, which is impossible.
Right.
Okay. And dealing with what most people call problems, which in construction speak is project management. Fancy word for problem solving.
Uh-huh.
So we just look at them as opportunities. Okay. Now, sometimes problems really are problems. They really are problems. There's really a screw up or a mess up. Most of the times it's actually not our fault, but sometimes it is. And this is the nature of life. So if you're afraid of that, you should not be an entrepreneur. You should just go try to follow your path, get your dreams in order, get your passion in order, and try and find somebody who's aligned with that. So, because if you think about it, if your day-to-day work, if your day-to-day hours spent is completely in sync with what you love doing, it's not work. It's not work. So I don't think of what I'm doing as work. which is why I'm up at 5:30 every day,
Sure.
reading newspapers, reading blogs, maybe returning emails, talking to Europe because we have an office in Europe, 2 offices actually, and just starting my day. 2 hours ago, I was sketching a speaker detail. Yesterday afternoon, I was on a conference call with Eddie Kramer, who's someone you know,
Yeah.
of course, involved in a project in South America right now where we're rotating a control room because the view will look better, and using all the cool tools that exist. He's in Toronto. Our client is in South America. I'm in New York, actually upstate New York. Um, the world is magical, but this was not work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, I was sending an invoice, we got paid, but it's not work. This is just what I do. On the other hand, I'm going to be fishing on Thursday.
Right.
That's cool, and
Right.
that's cool too.
The other thing I like about working for yourself is you can fire your clients.
Yes, I have an expression a lot of times. On more than one occasion, I've had people. I said, well, let's have a meeting to discuss this, and they said, well, how much is that meeting going to cost? I said, no cost. It's an hour of my time, no cost, unlike an attorney. They said, that's unusual. I said, if you don't hire me, you can't fire me. And
Right.
some people get it, and then some people just think okay. He doesn't know what he's great. I'm getting a free hour.
Right.
But what's really happening is while they're interviewing me or getting free information from me, which is usually what the case is,
Right.
I'm interviewing them.
Right.
I'm trying to find out, is this going to work? Because we're about to get married to that person for 6 months, sometimes
Right.
2 years. That's the kind of time frame of our projects. They could be 6 months, they could be a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years. They're not 10 years, they're not 10 minutes. So it's like at this point in my life, and that actually a long time ago, is like, wait a second, I just want to see if this is going to work. Okay, I mean, sometimes you need to take gigs to pay the rent, but we're past that. We're very, very, very fortunate. Okay, and it took a lot of work to do that, and it doesn't mean that we don't pay attention to RFPs and we don't pay attention to opportunities, or we're not aware of it. It just means that I'm gonna take a few extra minutes and I'm gonna see if this works. So I'll tell you where I learned that from.
Okay.
Where I really learned it from. I mean, I've learned it the hard way at WSDG, but I learned it from 2 passions sports, I guess, or hobbies. One of them is flying airplanes, which I used to do for a long time. I don't anymore, but I did. So I'm a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is scuba diving, which I also do.
Right.
But I still do. And I'm pretty, I got a lot of advanced certifications. I have rescue, master diver, all that stuff. I have a few thousand dives. In the winter, as you know, we live in Mexico, and I dive every day. And in both of those instances, you have to learn emergencies. As you move up in your ratings, that is what you have to learn. How do you deal with emergencies? And with very little exception, okay, like you're out of air, so there's only one thing to do. But in most emergencies, the first rule of thumb is to take a few seconds and assess the emergency. Assess the emergency. Assess the client. Don't jump in. More times than not, if you just jump in without taking a few extra seconds to figure out what's going on, you're going to screw it up. You're either going to hurt yourself or you're going to make the wrong move. Okay, and there are a few, and that's in both of those instances. The rescue, well, in scuba diving, it's a rescue course. You're always learning rescues and emergencies.
Right.
It's always the same. I mean, there are different procedures, obviously, okay, and different time windows, but it's always the same. Take a little extra time, evaluate the situation, see if this is going to work. Maybe you should go get some help before you dive in, okay? And this just comes, I think, with a little bit of experience. When you're 22, you say yes to everything.
Right.
Someone once asked me, remember, I teach, so I'm getting older, but my students are the same age.
Right.
So I teach. I've taught at a lot of audio schools. I'm teaching now pretty much exclusively at Berkeley, which I think is certainly one of the best schools.
Mm-hmm.
But I've taught at Full Sail. I helped design the studios there, and taught at Stevens and SAE, and guest lectures at a lot of schools. And it's not long before students in one way or another want to ask you how you got started. It's an obvious question. So, and they ask it in lots of different ways, what was Jimmy like and all, but really what they're asking, Karen, is how do I get started? That they're sort of interested in how I got started, but what they're really interested in is how do they get started?
Right.
How am I going to get my career started? Okay. And it's a really, and my answer is always the same. My answer is, I don't know how you're going to do it. I can tell you my story, and if there's a piece of it that resonates with you, okay, then I'm happy for you. But I follow your dreams and stay true to it. But for me, what I have found is I'm often asked, well, when does a child become an adult? I have 4 kids. They're all grown. Mm-hmm. I have 4 grandkids. One is just about grown up, and the other are pretty little, so they're growing up. And I've watched them. And when do they become adults? I think you become an adult when you learn to say no. Okay?
Yeah.
And that does not happen for everybody at the same age.
No, not at all.
I guarantee. I don't think I'm telling you anything that you don't know. Okay? I mean, I got some kids that should know how to say no, and they still don't know how to say no. And then my 4-year-old grandson seems to be smarter than me, but all 4-year-olds are smarter than most adults. Then they get stupid, then they get smart again. Because that's just part of the deal. But they're smart because they don't have to worry about 98% of the stuff in the world right now. So they're very focused. They're as Biden would say, they're laser focused.
Right.
I've been sick of that term for the last 3 days. So the teaching thing is really cool. I love teaching, and it's kept me young, and it keeps me in touch.
Right.
So, and Berkeley, has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, let's change direction a little bit. Let's talk about your design projects. How do you? Well, I want to know what's the most challenging project.
Hey, Karen, can I interrupt? Can I just, or
sure.
You can keep it going, but 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. No, you don't even have to get up. Stevie, you there? Okay, Stevie, I'm in a podcast, and actually you're being recorded. Go up to the green shed, okay, and you're going to see a giant piece of wood and metal. It's about 4 foot by 6 foot. It's really heavy. I need that to disappear from my life. That's the project, okay? Do whatever you want with it. I need it to go away, okay? Thanks, man. Thank you. Bye. I have a very strange life. What can I say? Actually, pretty interesting. So what am I throwing away? We tried to make well, we could talk about this a little bit later. This new software company that we have. We tried to design a membrane absorber that was tunable. So this is somewhat advanced, and this was a prototype. Tunable in that we could change the weight of the membrane, which was metal, on a box by having little spikes to come out and adding weights. So we would change its mass. Why? Because we think that membrane absorbers are very thin and they're going to be very efficient at low frequency absorption, which is really the problem in small rooms. So we just went from one part of my life to the other. This particular prototype was made in Boston, was sent down we have a testing room on a property here. Okay. And we got some information from it, but it turns out it's too heavy and it didn't really do what we wanted to do. And it's been sitting in my storage shed, taking up valuable room. And finally, I said, I got to get rid of this, but it's way too heavy. So that was the guy that takes care of my grounds. I said, anyway.
Okay. So tell me what your most challenging project's been.
Well, I'm not going to answer that question exactly. That's like, what's your most favorite studio?
I know, and I was trying to say it so it wouldn't actually say that, but
it's the same question. I don't think there's only. I mean, my answer is always going to be the same, and I'm not dissing or shucking or shying away from the question. But my most challenging project and my most favorite project is the one I'm working on today. It's
okay.
always going to be the same answer, and it's a little bit of a cop out because I kind of do it. Now, having said that, there are certainly parts of the hundreds or thousands of studios that I've done since 1969, which just means I'm old, um, and that have been challenging, that are my favorite. There have been some that were really, really easy, and then they got really famous. And then there was some that were absolutely amazing, and they only lasted for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, the entire gamut and spectrum of deliverables exist, but I don't generally spend too much time looking backwards. So,
Okay.
On a more sincere note to you, um, I'm not I'm not afraid of that question. It's just not my favorite way of looking at things.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, Electric Lady Studios changed my life. It,
Right.
it changed my life. But I know you a long time, and I know you in a lot of different capacities. And who's ever listening to this, okay, Karen is an industry colleague and a friend that's been very kind to me and our company over the years in her different roles and categories. And kudos to you for sort of reinventing yourself during the pandemic and doing all of this. But, me to you, how much do you think I knew at 22
Right.
about studio design? Now, let's just get real. Not that much.
Right.
As a matter of fact, nobody really knew that much because it was an industry in its infancy. Okay. Having said that, I had a passion for it. I dove into it. I created my own internship. The job turned out to be a complete accident. Jimmy hired me to do a club. He went to a club that I designed, and that commission was an accident that only happened because I was waiting online for ice cream and answered an ad to do carpentry for free, and then visited these people and said I'd redesign the club, and the club opened and it became famous, and it was kind of cool downtown club. And Jimmy was buying a club and wanted to convert the club, and next thing you know, I'm just doing a club for Jimmy, and then Eddie Kramer talks him out of doing the club. It's a well-known story, true, all true.
Uh-huh.
And so my first commission at 22 disappeared as fast as it arrived. And then they said, you could do the studio, even after I reminded them that I'd never been in a studio.
Uh-huh.
I was a musician, pretty good musician. I was in a rock band in college, first chair clarinet player in high school, classical piano since I was 8. Could get around. I actually thought I was going to be a musician coming out of college rather than an architect, but I also worked during the day as an architect. And life changed on a dime. And I left my job. I found an acoustician who was doing radio stations that involved a lot of isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially talked my way into doing all of his drafting for free if he could show me how to do the details, which he did.
Uh-huh.
And I created my own internship. And I think the concept of an internship was ingrained in me because at Princeton, all of our classes involved a lecture and then very small, intimate, twice a week sessions with the professors, sometimes outdoors. Plus, most of my work was studio work, one-on-one work.
Mm-hmm.
So the way of learning was very Socratic. This is kind of an old model. It goes all the way back to Socrates and Aristotle and Plato.
Right.
So I said, I didn't answer an ad to be an intern. I just sort of said, how am I going to learn this stuff? I don't have any time to go back to school. I have to know how to do this now.
So you created your own path.
I just bulldozed my way in.
Yeah.
My wife at the time, first wife at the time, was working. We seemed to have enough money. Meanwhile, it's 1968 and 1969 in New York City. You tell me what it was like. It was fun. We were having fun.
Yeah.
And it was easy, and we didn't have the problems of the world today, and there was always enough money, and I don't know, it was just easier. And and I sort of stumbled through it. And some of the things were accidental, but some of them were done with a little bit of science in mind, particularly the ceiling at Electric Lady A. And it was only many years later that I finally got to actually figure out why that studio works all these years. And it does work. It's not an accident that it's still there. Okay? And it still sounds the way it sounds. I had inadvertently made a membrane absorber in the ceiling that basically controlled the low frequency, giving it that kind of tight sound which was required for rock and roll. It was a little bit of an accident, a little bit of a hunch, no formulas, and a little bit of luck. And then the rest just unfolded. I mean, before it was done, I had 3 other studios to do. I mean, I went to Woodstock with Albert Grossman in his limo because I was designing Bearsville. I mean, world just unfolded almost too fast. But at 22 and 23, I had no idea it was too fast. To me, it was just, okay, this is what's supposed to happen. All right, seems okay, because the times were very exciting, if you can remember, and then it wasn't all a straight line by any stretch. I don't think it's even interesting to go over this 51 years, but it has its bumps, its wiggles, its tragedies. I lost a brother early on. I was not able to stay as focused on relationships as maybe I should have. It took a long time before I finally found the person that I was really meant to be with. And a few false starts on where to live, but basically always in the New York area. A little bit of Colorado, but always New York.
But you've always traveled, right?
Always
traveled. You travel extensively.
Yeah, not in the last year and a half so much.
Yeah.
And Beth always traveled. Beth had her own business importing artifacts from the Far East. She would travel. She loved to travel. I loved to travel. So that was an easy mix. I mean, it didn't take long before. I mean, within months we were going places together and doing things. And we, if you want to see how you get along with someone, go away for 2 weeks with them.
Right. Yeah.
You're going to learn pretty quick. And,
so I know that you go to Mexico in the winters, and I know that you scuba dive a lot. Why, of all the places that you guys have been, why did you settle in Mexico?
Well, when I was 16, my parents, and it was the last time I didn't work during the summer. My dad was an international commodities trader. He was representing a 3rd generation English merchant company after World War II. So he traveled a lot, and like globalization as a word, I didn't know any other word. I mean, I went to college on sales from imported Japanese steel. So, because that's what my dad did. Right. And so among other commodities, cocoa, wire, nails from Belgium, so he felt that I should live with a foreign family during this last summer. I think it was my sophomore to junior year in high school. In fact, it was my junior to senior year in high school. And after that, I worked every other summer. And so they enrolled me in this exchange program, and students would live with families for 2 months, and it was in Mexico. We lived. It was in the state of Veracruz, a town called Orizaba. You never heard of it. No tourists, zero to no English in the town. I studied a little Spanish, couldn't speak a word really, so it was an immersion moment in Spanish. So the little bit of Spanish that I know, I can get by, basically comes from that summer. At the same time, there were 7 other American students from different parts of the United States living with families. And then there were 8 of these groups. And our group, and then for the last month, you pooled your spending money. Each kid got a little spending money, which we gave to a counselor. There was some studying in the afternoon. It was a program. And we decided to go somewhere. So I knew because of my interest in architecture, I knew about the ruins in Tulum. Now this is 1963. So the Tulum that you read about now, doesn't exist in 1963. Tulum is like 8 buildings. The ruins, there's no gate. They're just there. There's that whole stretch. There's no Cancun. The word Cancun doesn't exist. It's not even a word yet until 1973. And we took a third-class train all the way to Juarez, which is the port of Cancun, a boat to Isla Mujeres, no cars, no cars.
I love that island.
All right, but imagine it with no cars.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Just hammocks and turtle farms. And we lived there. And then we took a third-class bus with chickens all the way down to Tulum. Took 6 hours. Now it takes an hour and 20 minutes. Okay, on a road. And I fell in love with that area, and I would always return every few years to that section. And then when Beth and I got married, we honeymooned on Isla Mujeres, and we started going there with our kids every Christmas for a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks. And then, I don't know, 20 years ago, it was time to come home, I don't know, January 5th or 6th. By then the kids were in boarding school. And we said, you guys have to go home, but we don't. And we just put them on the plane and they could fly by themselves. And we stayed. And now we have a home there. We've had a home there for 15, 20 years now. In a little town called Akumal. Ak means turtle in Mayan. So Akumal means home of the turtles. And that's our winter home. And I work. Beth paints. And we've been going there a long time. We have friends there. We have a life there. And that's, winter in the Northeast is a little cold.
Right.
We're up near Woodstock. That's where I am now. So that's our winter home. And then now we've added a third home in Durham, North Carolina, because our both sons live there. One having 3 kids. So we have a sort of third life now that's starting in Durham because of our family. And, but always working at all times.
Right.
Beth has studios in all 3 places. She's painting studios in all 3 places. Yeah.
That's great. So I didn't know this about you. I didn't realize that you were a huge baseball fan. I'm basketball. I love basketball, baseball, not so much, but I understand that your goal in life is to go to every stadium in the country.
I don't know if it's a goal, but it's just about happened. I'm only missing 6.
Wow.
And I've been to many stadiums that don't exist anymore. At least a dozen, if not 15.
So I want to know which stadium you think has the best design, whether it's because you get closest to the field or because of the view from or what? Because Candlestick's an amazing stadium.
You don't mean Candlestick, you mean the new AT&T.
No, the AT&T.
Candlestick was about the worst stadium.
Yeah, but the AT&T you can.
No,
the base right there.
So first of all, my daughter, who I think you've even met once, certainly, lives in Mill Valley and is a California kid after graduating from University of Colorado, where she was raised. And so when they opened up, I guess it was Pac Bell when it first opened.
Right. Yeah.
First Pac Bell. I was there for the first home run. Now, the first home run in a season game was hit by, of course, Barry Bonds.
Right.
But that was not the first home run in a game. The first home run in a game was hit in the exhibition game 2 days before or 3 days before by Jorge Posada, the catcher for the Yankees. Was the first person to actually hit a home run out into the little bay there. And I was there for that game. And I've been to Pac Bell, now AT&T, 50 times if I've been there once. It's a great stadium. I think, Baltimore is a great stadium. It's probably the first of those new stadiums that look old, that are small, that are in the city.
Right.
Right now, the Fenway is, of course, now that Yankee Stadium got torn down, Fenway is my favorite because it's small. It's only 38,000 people and it's tucked in to Boston and everybody walks there. And it's funky and the dimensions are weird. and the monster, and and it's funky underneath, and it's just Boston. Obviously, both the old and the new Yankee Stadium are ones that I go to a lot because I'm from New York.
Right.
The Safeco is pretty good in Seattle. It's a favorite one of mine. Of course, the two oldest are obviously Wrigley and Fenway. Now that the stadium got torn down, but what's the third oldest? This is a good bar. This is a good way to win some money in a bar.
What is the third oldest?
Well, the first two are easy. You might not get them in the right order, but
right.
Fenway and Wrigley. But the third oldest is Dodger Stadium. Yes. 60 years old. Yes. Wow. Every other stadium is new. Every other stadium is new.
Oh, I would never have guessed Dodger.
No, of course not. I've gotten that, tricked a lot of people on that. You don't think of it as an old stadium. It's also unlike any other stadium. It's got a different. So you have to realize that I grew up as a Dodger fan. So I'm born in '46, and I'm a Long Island suburban kid. All the fathers got on the train and went into the city to work, except for my cousin Lee, who also lived in Long Island in the suburbs. He got in a car and he drove to Ebbets Field because he was secretary of the Dodgers. So I would go to Ebbets Field all the time. I sat on Jackie Robinson's lap. I used to play stickball with Carl Furillo, signed baseballs. I got Roy Campanella's glove. I mean, until one day I came home and my parents said, your cousin Idlin, the wife, and Lee are moving to California. I was 10 years old. I said, what is California? I never heard of California. I was 10 years old. And they said, it's on the other side of the country. Okay, why? Because the Dodgers are leaving. I said, Dad, the Dodgers can't leave. The city owns I didn't know anything about the business of baseball. So that was, of course, turns out I wasn't the only one that said that, of course. But I'm a baseball fan. I mean, pandemic days are a little bit weird, but before the pandemic, I'd go to 40 games a year. I'd count my games in cities, average about 11 or 12 a year. Wow. Cities, different cities.
That's pretty amazing.
Not unusual for me to schedule business meetings. Hold on a second. Let me get back to you, and I'll punch in the Minnesota schedule. Yeah, how's Thursday, the 23rd? That looks pretty good, right? Because there's a game that night. My teaching at Berkeley always had to relate to a game schedule. Yeah. Right. And I still play. I still play softball. I'm not any good, but I still play. I'm a little old for it, but I still play.
Is it slow pitch or regular softball?
Medium pitch. As fast as you can without a windmill. I catch, which is a little strange for my age, but I like catching. And I have a regulation field in my backyard.
That's great. It's like lights. Field of Dreams.
Yeah, but no lights. I went to Beth. I said, maybe we should put some lights. She said, no. This was after thousands of dollars worth of dynamite work and blasting and cutting trees down and fences. And we have the thing that makes the lines and the bases, everything. Yeah.
Oh, that's very
cool. We play a few times a year, but yeah, I love baseball. Baseball is there's a symmetry in baseball and there's an honesty in baseball. I can't say it as well as some of the great authors, who have written all those books on it, but there's just something about the game that's magical in my opinion. So it's pretty much every night I'm watching a game or a piece of a game. And
I don't understand
Durham,
that
of course, when we finally decided to get a home in Durham, we looked in a lot of different places, and finally because we've been buying some renovations things for my son, we've been sponsoring his company, and now he's on his own buying and renting houses and fixing them up and stuff. But we needed a house of our own, and the longtime broker, I said, just find us something. We gave her the size that we were looking for and some of the quality. They said, but it has to be walking distance from the Durham Bulls, and it is walking distance from the Durham Bulls. Yeah, so that's important.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So I know we're running out of time, so I have one last question for you that I ask everybody. We were talking earlier before we started recording this. This whole thing for me is about the pro audio community. and I
Yeah.
love this community
Yeah.
so much. The
I do
people
too.
are amazing.
Yeah.
So what does community mean to you?
Well, the pro audio community for me, and I didn't understand this starting. I mean, I didn't really understand community, to tell you the truth, when I was young. I went to an Ivy League school, so already I'm behind the eight ball because kind of preached elitism, which took a while to throw that back. Great education, fantastic education, but a little bit lofty sometimes.
Hmm.
And then, you know, the 60s in Manhattan. So, world spinning around at warp speed
Right.
with a career that took off. But the cool thing about the pro audio community is that there's a lot of tentacles to it. There's the
Hmm.
equipment side, there's the technology side, there's the design side, producing side, engineering side. But at the root of almost every one of those tentacles is a passion for music.
Right.
Okay. Lots of different kinds of music. So that was kind of cool. So it was a very easy way. You can't say that about other industries or other sectors or other genres. Okay. I
Right.
mean, have you really ever gone to an AES, which is a somewhat technical universe, and look around? You're there all the time. Everybody loves music at some level. They may not produce it, they may not engineer it. Certainly, we have lots of different kinds of music.
Right.
Okay, so not everybody's on the same page, but everybody loves some kind of music. Or what would be the reason for being there? There'd just be no reason. Even the guy selling insurance at the AES loves music, or he's learned to love music. So it's been a pretty easy community to jump in. Um, I think it's a relatively loving community. By that I mean, it's a community where people have to make a living.
Hmm.
So there's invoicing, there's business issues and whatnot. But since the heart and soul and the mission of the community is to make things sound better and to make music spread further and wider, okay, people are ready to kind of put some of that cutthroat stuff aside and get a little bit cozier. Again, I don't know if I see that in every other
Right.
sector. Okay. Um, for me, it's been a really cool way because growing up, my passions were music and architecture, music and design. I graduated from college. Within one day, I had a day job as an architect, and I was in a 12-piece blues band, making more money in the blues band. I was in a band that very much liked the Commitments. It was that kind of band
Uh-huh.
because the clarinet became a sax. Okay, that was pretty easy jump, and I
Hmm.
could get by enough to sort of play a little. And so sometimes I'd play keyboards, organ, Hammond organ, and sometimes I'd jump on a sax. Okay, and I did the arranging. I could read and write music, so I loved arranging the parts. It was fun,
Hmm.
and so I thought I had no idea what was going to happen. It was the day job was what I had to do. Wasn't overwhelmingly interesting, but at least it was architecture.
Right.
While I explored music, which was, of course, you know, you never know where you're going to go with that. You just don't know where that's going to go. At least the architecture, I was getting a check every other week. Okay, but
Right.
but and then life changed and things happened and somebody quit and it went the way of most bands. Okay, but I still play piano every day. I don't play the sax anymore. I don't think I could get a note out of it. So, but it was a perfect nexus of those two passions. And then I guess underneath all of it, I've kind of always been a little geeky, a little tech. I like technology. I love flying. I love to fly. I like scuba diving. I like technical things. Kind of handy.
Hmm.
Loved carpentry. My son picked that up. I'm not particularly good at it, but I like it. And so think about it. What we're doing every day is the nexus of architecture, technology, and 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 music. It's
Yeah.
and acoustics basically. That's our
Right.
motto: technology, acoustics, and architecture. It's perfect. And in the middle is music. It's an easy community to be a part of, and it's been really really fun. And I mean, for me, you know it's well like the last 40 minutes with you. This is this is fun. It's fun to have a conversation with Bruce Springsteen.
Sure. Yeah.
It's cool. I mean, most people can't do that. I've had my share of, famous people, but it's also fun to have a conversation with the number 3 instructor at NYU, who's like really, who's seriously, an expert in surround sound, or has an opinion on 12-1 versus 7-1 or 5-1. So I've gotten to meet a lot of really interesting people. And then at the same time, the next day when I'm teaching, I'm in a room with an 18-year-old who's got some crazy idea that at first glance maybe doesn't make sense. And then you say, like a few hours later when the class is over, it's like, wait a second, that wasn't such a bad idea. That's a pretty cool idea. And he's just stretching. He's just starting.
Yeah.
So it's been a pretty easy, it's been an amazing community. The pandemic has stretched us all to our limits. I think everybody's been interested. Everybody's been trying to figure out how we're going to get out of it, and then what changes are going to stick. I was just in a conversation last night with a former college classmate from years ago. He was back. We had dinner together, and we were asking each other, what have we learned, and what's going to stick, what's not going to stick. But a few things that are going to stick is music is definitely going to stick. I mean, I think music's going to save us, but that's a little bit biased. And another thing that's going to stick is that people like to listen to music, okay, in interesting environments.
Right.
Okay. Now, the AirPods, that's sort of the current environment, but even that has an opportunity to get more interesting. Okay. And at the end of the day, I still think people like making music and producing music, producing musical content in cool rooms. So the equipment has gotten incredibly good at 1/10 the price as it was, if you think about it, 30 years ago.
Right.
Okay. So what's the only thing left? And the rooms have gotten smaller because the equipment got smaller and building is more expensive. Okay. But the one constant that still is staying there is people want these rooms to sound better and better, and they want them to have more and more vibe. It's like, are you serious? This is where I started. I don't know anything other than making a room with vibe, because that's all that Jimmy wanted. That's why he broke out. He and just a handful of others said, I don't want to work in these studios. I'm going to build my own studio. That was a very bold thing to do in 1969. You just didn't do that. You had to have some guts. And to do it in downtown Manhattan was unheard of. There were no studios in downtown Manhattan. Why? Because he lived there. He said, I don't have to. Why go uptown? I'm going to live downtown. And so think about it. It never occurred to me that a studio shouldn't have vibe, shouldn't have personality. And that term has changed over the project studio and home studio and this studio and that studio, E-studio. I mean, people giving it different names, but for me, it's the same ride. It's the same ride. Okay, while we just keep pushing the bar on the technology and on the acoustics. Why? Because people just want better sounding stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, in smaller rooms. Okay, and on a technical note, if we're coming to our end here, as rooms get smaller, and as we need to pay more attention to low frequencies, because the music we're listening to seems to have more and more low frequency information, okay, and more demand for it and better speakers, it turns out it's harder and harder to do it. As rooms get smaller, making low frequency information behave more accurately is hard. It's actually easier in bigger rooms. It's a whole other podcast. It's a little bit to start on now, but I'm in the right place at the right time. So even at 75, I'm just starting.
Yeah.
Just starting. Okay. If somebody told me that our little research project that we started 2 years ago was going to evolve into a software company, I would have said, we're not going there. I don't want to have a software company, but that's what happened.
Yeah.
Sure enough. So here we go. Here we go again.
Okay. Well, this has been great. Thanks so much, John. We could talk. I could do another one of these with you.
Having said that, it's important that I go scuba diving as much as possible.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. So We didn't get to talk about scuba diving. I'd love to do that next time.
You know why I like scuba diving? And I like scuba diving for the same reason I liked flying airplanes. I stopped because I just couldn't do it enough.
Uh-huh.
You don't do it enough, you can actually, things can happen that are not so. Same with diving too. But I like diving because once I'm there, once I'm in the water, I'm basically not thinking about anything else other than the dive and what I'm looking at.
Right.
So for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, sometimes an hour, I can really, really, it's a little bit like Zen. It's a little bit like yoga. It's a little bit like meditation. Okay.
That's why I like swimming. It's the
Yeah.
same thing. When swimming, it's just, you're doing those laps.
I'm just focused on that. And that's, so from 30,000 feet, now I'm down, actually not even zero, minus 80.
Uh-huh.
As that just said. So that's, but anyway, but Karen, thank you. I love listening to some of your podcasts, and I like that you're taking people that we know their stories. I mean, we know kind of what they do professionally. And you're trying to drill in a little bit to some other sides of just the world of their life. You know, that's kind of cool.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's very nice. Thank you. And also an official thank you for all the years for being very supportive.
Of course. Yeah, sure.